So let's see. There we go. Oh, good, good. Well, okay, so that's an agent. Good morning, everyone. How's it going today? Welcome back to the channel and welcome to this video. In today's video, I'm going to show you how to create a ReAct agent from scratch. In other words, we are not going to be using any framework such as LlamaIndex or LangChain. We're going to be creating it from scratch using only Python, okay? Now, the idea behind this is that I want you to better understand how the ReAct pattern works in agents. And also, by the end of the video, something pretty interesting is that I'm going to be talking to you a little bit about a program that I'm going to be opening, which is a coaching program where I'm going to be taking a few of you to learn AI engineering and creating AI applications. It's kind of a private course, okay? So I'll let you know a little bit more about that by the end of the course. But right now, let's actually focus on creating ReAct agents. So the first thing that we want to do is to understand what is the ReAct pattern. And after that, we're going to start coding it, all right? So let's do that. All right, so the first thing that I want us to understand is what is a ReAct agent. And first of all, let's actually talk about agents. What is an agent? And one of the answers or one of the explanations that I've seen people use the most, and which is actually very intuitive, is that let's suppose that you go to ChatGPT and you have a question and you ask ChatGPT your question. Now, ChatGPT is going to give you an answer, but most of the time, that first answer that you're going to get from ChatGPT is not going to be the final answer that you actually want. You may want to go a little bit further from that answer or to tweak it a little bit or change some details in the answer that it gave you. Now you're going to go back and forth with ChatGPT, a few messages in this conversation, and after, let's say, 5 messages or so, you're going to arrive to a result that you actually want and you want to use. And now you're going to copy that result and use it in your workflow, okay? Now, an agent is essentially that. However, that loop is going to be automated, okay? In other words, an agent is just essentially a loop that is going to go to the language model, ask for a question, then get a response, then ask for another question, and then improve on that message until you get the final result that you want. And that is essentially the broad definition of an agent, okay? Now, once we have that in mind, we can start understanding what is the ReAct model for agents, okay? So let's now that we have understood what is an agent in itself, let's talk about what is a ReAct agent. Okay, so now that we have successfully kind of understood what is an agent and what it actually does, let's actually consider the ReAct pattern, which is a very nice pattern and very intuitive way of designing agents that can interact with the real world through the usage of tools, okay? Now, the ReAct pattern essentially depends on this very simple loop that we see right here. It's a loop called thought, action, observation. And essentially what it relies on is on this observation, this idea that when we are humans and we want to do something, sometimes we articulate that thought in our head before actually performing the action. So for example, let's say that you're baking a cake or something in the kitchen, and then you may need some milk. So what is going to happen is that you're going to read the recipe, you will see that you need some milk, and inside your head, you're going to think, okay, I now need 2 glasses of milk. I'm going to go look for the milk in the fridge, okay? And once that thought was articulated, then you go to the fridge to find the milk. And that is essentially what they are trying to do here. So they're going to be using a language model in order to make the agent think of this thought and then select an action from the available action. So let's say that you ask your agent, what is the mass of, let's say, the Earth? So it's going to enter this loop, and the first thing that it's going to do is going to enter through the thought. So it's going to be something like, okay, so now I have to find the mass of the Earth. Now I should look on the internet to find the mass of the Earth. And searching the internet is going to be one of its available tools. So it's going to look on the internet. It's going to find an output. And that output is going to be called an observation. And the observation is going to put back into the original prompt, and we're going to restart the cycle again, the loop. So we're going to add the observation right here. Let's say that we found that the mass of the Earth is, 1 trillion tons. And it's going to put it back into the thought. And now that it has that information, it's going to go back to thinking. It's going to be like, okay, so now I have the total mass of the Earth. Now I can answer the question. And now instead of choosing an action, it's going to exit this loop, and it's going to give you the final answer. It's going to be something like, according to, let's say, Wikipedia, you have the Earth weighs, I don't know how many tons, right? And that is essentially how it works. Now, what I actually prepared for you is an even more detailed diagram for you right here. So let's suppose that you have your agent right here. And the first thing that you have to consider is that it has an initial system prompt, okay? So the initial system prompt looks something like this. So you are an agent and you work in a cycle, in a loop. So your loop is going to be thought, then it's going to be your action, and it's going to be your observation. If you choose an action, you will have to pause. So let me just edit this real quick right here. So if you choose an action, you're going to pause. There you go. Okay, so there you go. So you choose an action, then you run the action, you get the observation back, and then you work on this loop until you find the answer. By the end, you will select an answer, okay? Now, something important to include in the initial prompt as well is the available tools that the agent has available. So in this case, I'm just going to give it one tool, which is going to be Search Wikipedia. And it is going to know when to use Search Wikipedia, because Search Wikipedia may have this additional description, something like use this tool when you want to find some information from Wikipedia, etc. Okay? And then now answer this question. And that is when it enters the loop. So we're going to ask it, what is the total mass of the Earth? And let me just put this all together like this. So we're asking a question, what is the total mass of the Earth? And it enters this thought, action, observation loop. So the first thought, we're going to send the prompt, and we're going to get this thought right here. So the first thought is going to be something like, I need to find the mass of the Earth. And the action that it's going to choose from the list of actions that we made available to it, and in this case, we just have one action, which is Search Wikipedia. It's going to select the action Search Wikipedia, and it's going to search for the mass of the Earth. I mean, of course, this is just a very, very broad example. And then after we get this response, we're going to put this back into the prompt, and then we're going to call this tool that the agent selected. So we selected Search Wikipedia, and we pass in the parameter mass of the Earth, because that is what the agent selected. And then the tool is going to select the result. And this one right here is what we call the observation, okay? So remember this diagram. It selected its tool, then the tool got an output, we got an observation, and then the observation is incorporated back into the prompt. And in this case, we only have one single iteration for the loop, but the idea is that you can have an agent with multiple tools or multiple stages and steps in the thought process. And the idea is that it's going to continue looping through this until it finds a solution. So here you have this, here you have the observation, and actually this observation is already the final answer to it. So it's going to be, here it is going to respond something like, okay, so now I have the answer. It's going to think, and it's going to send all of this back to the language model, and this is going to get back something like, okay, so now I have the answer to the actual question, and then it's going to respond something like, according to Wikipedia, the total mass of the Earth is 5.9 times 10 to the 24th, okay? So there you go. I mean, that is essentially how a ReAct agent works. This is the loop, and if the question had been a little bit more complicated, let's say, what is the joint mass of all of the planets? Then we will have this question right here, and would enter the loop. It would search for the mass of the first planet, search for the mass of the second planet, etc. And then we could have another tool that is going to be something like calculate, and then it would sum everything together and then give you the response. Okay, so you can see how this loop would work, and it is thanks to this initial system prompt. And we're going to be coding all of this in Python within a few minutes, okay? So that is how the ReAct framework works. And now let's actually start coding this in Python. All right, so now the next thing that we're going to want to do is we're going to go to Groq and to Groq Cloud, okay? So that is console.groq.com. And the idea is that you're going to get your API keys. And in case you don't know what Groq is, it is essentially this service that allows you to use these open source models. They have Llama 8B, 1170B, Mixtral, etc. And the idea is that you can use them for free, actually. I mean, within a certain limit. And yeah, I mean, it's super fast because they have probably the fastest architecture for generating completions of these models. So what we're going to do is we're going to go to API keys. We're going to go to create a new API key. I'm just going to call it temp to be sure to delete it before I upload the video. And then we're going to go to our Colab notebook right here, and we're going to initialize it. So I'm going to say import OS, and we're going to say os.environ, and we're going to set Groq API key. We're going to set it to the API key that we just initialized. And something else that we're going to want to do is probably we're going to want to install Groq. So let's do that too. We're going to do pip install Groq. And once that is done, we're going to be able to actually start creating our agent. So there we go. And remember that we're not going to be using any language frameworks, any large language model frameworks like LlamaIndex or LangChain. I mean, of course, in production, you would probably want to use one of those. But the idea behind this tutorial is to show you how this works behind the scenes. So once that we have this, let's actually start creating the agent. All right, so what we're going to do right now is we're going to actually test these models right here. So in order to do that, the first thing that I want you to do is to go to the documentation of Groq Cloud. We go to a quick start, and as you can see right here, we have just a very quick example of how you perform a completion with Groq. So I'm just going to copy it. We don't have to do this again because we already did pip install Groq. And now we can just click right here and actually paste all of this code inside of here. Just going to minimize this. There we go. So what we're going to do is we're going to say import first OS. We're going to import Groq from Groq. This essentially imports the class that allows us to interact with the Groq API. And here we have that they're initializing it, passing the API key that we initialized up here, and then they're passing in the messages. This API, of course, receives a list of messages as the prompt instead of just a single string. And here the message that we're going to be passing is just a simple message saying, explain the importance of fast language models. And then the second parameter that we have to set is the model that we want to use. And remember that in order to choose a model, you're going to have to go to documentation as well, to models, and here you can choose whichever you want. By default, I think that we had Llama 8B, which is this one. But for agentic behavior, you probably want to use 70B, which is better. So I'm just going to change that right here. And let's actually execute that. And by the end, we're just printing whatever the chat completion is, tapping into the first choice that it returned, the message inside of it, and the content of the message, which is tapped because, essentially it returns an object that looks a little bit like this. And then it returns from this object, we want to tap into the content property. So to actually get the answer from the language model. So let's just execute this. And there we have it. This is the response. Fast language models have revolutionized the field. And there we go. So that was good. Now that we have successfully imported Groq, we can actually start creating the agent itself. So let's create this agent class. Okay, so now let's just initialize this agent class. I'm going to create it like this, class agent, like this. And there are a few things that I want to do. The first thing that I want to do is to define an init function. And this function essentially is just going to initialize my agent. And what do I need in order to initialize this? Well, first of all, I am going to need the client. And in this case, the client, I'm just going to be saying that it's going to be a Groq. You know what? I'm not going to use typing here. It's going to use like this. And the system, which is going to be the system message. Okay. And this one is essentially just going to initialize it all, saying that the self client is going to equal client. Then the system prompt is going to equal to the system prompt. Then the self, we're going to initialize a property called messages. And this is essentially going to be a list of messages that our agent is going to include inside of its memory in some way. Okay, so all of this loop of messages is going to be stored here. You're going to see how that works in just a moment. And then last but not least, we're going to say that if we have a system message, we're going to append it to the messages. And as you can see right here, we're just going to append it saying that the role is going to be the system, and then the content is going to be self system that we initialized right here. And there we go. So that is the first init function. Then we're going to initialize a function called call, which is essentially just going to be executed whenever we call this agent. And this one essentially just will take I'll take a message like this. And this one right here, we're going to say that if there is a message, we are going to append that message into our history of messages, right? So we're going to say self messages, we're going to append it, and we're going to append it on the side of the user, because if we are if we are entering this loop of the user, if we're calling the agent with a parameter, we are going to essentially be the user who is going to be adding a system message to this thing, a message to this agent. So let's just plug it right in right here. And then we're going to find that the result of that is going to be whatever the agent gives us from the execute method, which we have not initialized yet. We're going to initialize it a little bit later down here. Then from the messages, we're going to append the result from that, and then we're just going to return the result. And then, of course, the execute method that we haven't created. This one is going to be, first of all, we're going to create a completion, just like we did up here. Okay, now let's actually just copy this right here. Because remember that we're passing in a client like this, so this is here, we're going to, there we go, it should look something like this. So completion, the completion is essentially just going to call the client, the completions, etc. And here, instead of just passing in the messages like this, what we're going to do is we're going to pass in the messages that are inside, that are the property right here, okay? So what else do we do right here? And then we just return the completion, choices, message, and content, just like we did right here, okay? And there we go. That is essentially our agent, and it should work already. But let me just tour you around a little bit behind the logic of all of this so that you understand what is actually going on. So we have the agent. When we initialize the agent with a client and a system message, we're going to first initialize the property of the client. We're going to initialize the system message, which is the one that we saw right here, the system prompt. which is something like you're working it's not a cycle, it's a loop. You work in a loop, and then you work in a loop of thought, action, observation, etc. And then that is the system message that we're initializing right here. We're going to be writing that in a moment. Then we're going to be creating this list of messages, and then if there is the system message in here, and I mean if it's not an empty message, we're going to append it to our list of messages as the system message. Remember that when you're creating an agent or any kind of call to your language model, the system message essentially just gives the initial instructions to your language model to follow during the entire conversation. So that is the first part right here. Then we have the call method, which is essentially going to be triggered anytime we do agent parenthesis, okay? I mean, the instance of our agent with parenthesis. So if we call it with a message, then we're going to say that we're going to append the message into our list of messages, and then we're going to execute the language model. And this execute the agent, is essentially just going to run a completion with all of the messages that are in our history right here. And then it's going to append the result from that completion and return the result. Okay, so that is essentially all that is happening. And you can see that if we run the same agent without doing anything more than initializing it and running it several times, it is going to make a call to the language model right here. It's going to append it, and then it's going to call that again, append it, call that again, append it, and you can see how that can go in a sort of infinite loop. So it's important to stop that loop at some point, but we're going to do that in just a moment. So far we have successfully coded this agent, and let's actually take a look at creating the system prompt and the tools that our agent is going to have available. Okay, so now let's actually write the system prompt for our agent. Now the system prompt is essentially just going to prompt our agent to respond with a thought and an action whenever possible, and pause afterwards. And then we're going to run the run the tool that it selected, return the observation ourselves, and then get the response from the agent. So the idea right here is to write this prompt in a more verbose and more clear way. And I'm actually going to be taking this from this blog post from Simon Willison. Great blog post. And the idea is that he has written this prompt right here, which is pretty useful. And we're just going to copy it. I mean, I changed it a little bit in order to fit to the example that I'm using. So, but I just wanted to give a quick shout out to Simon Willison, from which I took this. Great. So let's go back here, and I'm just going to copy and paste this prompt right here. So the prompt essentially looks like this. So the system prompt goes: you run in a loop of thought, action, pause, and then observation. At the end of the loop, you output an answer. Use thought to describe your thoughts about the question you have asked. Use action to run one of the actions available to you. Then return pause. Okay, this is very important, that it should always return pause once it returns an action, because we're going to be parsing that. Okay. Then the observation will be the result of running the action in question. So your available actions are, and here we're just going to give it the actions that it has, that it can choose from. And here it is: calculate, which runs a calculation and returns a number. Use Python to be sure. So be sure to use floating point syntax if necessary. So for example, the action is going to be calculate 4 times 7 is over 3. And then the other available action is going to be get the planet mass. Okay, so the idea behind this agent is that it is going to be able to get the mass of any planet in the solar system, and then make calculations with whichever numbers it wants. So get planet mass returns the weight of the planet in kilograms, and the way to call it, here we give an example of how to call it, etc. Okay. Now this is very important. This is essentially the tool set of your agent. So you want to write this very in a very detailed way. Okay, so there you go. And then we give it an example, because giving an example to your agent is very useful to make sure that it always responds with the format that you expect it to respond. Okay, so the question for this example is, what is the mass of the Earth times 2? So the thought is going to be something like, I need to find the mass of the Earth. The action is going to be get the planet mass, Earth. And here you can see that we're using the action from the actions available, and then passing in the parameter, which is a string right here, and which is just the name of the planet. And then we return pause. Then you will be called again. Here we have this with the observation. Oops. And the observation is just the response. Then the second thought is going to be something like, I need to multiply this by 2. And as you can see, we are already in the second iteration of this thought. So we run the action, selected the tool, we selected the action, run the action, got the observation, and fed it back to the prompt in order to get a new thought. And that new thought is, now I need to multiply this by 2. So the action that it returned is calculate this by 2. Then we pause, and you will be called again with this, which is the observation. And once you have the final answer, you have to output the answer. And here you have answer, mass of the Earth times 2 is da-da-da. And there you go. And now I just prompted it with, now it's your turn, so that it knows that it is the agent's turn, its turn to actually perform this entire loop, okay? So that's what's going on behind the scenes in this prompt. We're going to be fitting this into the agent within the system parameter right here. And now what we have to do is actually code these two functions right here, which are calculate and get planet mass. So let's do that right now. Okay, so we have successfully got this right here. I'm just going to run this in order to actually create this. And the second thing we're going to do is we're going to define the tools. So remember that we said that the tools available are going to be calculate and get mass. So the first one is going to be calculate, and then we have the input, and then we'll return the evaluation of whichever that input is. I'm just going to call this, instead of input, I'm going to call it operation, like that. So there we go. We're essentially just returning the evaluation of whichever is run right here as a string. And the second one is going to be get planet mass. So what I'm going to do right here is actually just mock an actual search in the internet or something like that. So we're going to define a get planet mass function. And so this is very important to keep in mind, that the actions or the tools that your agent has access to are essentially just functions, okay? So here we have calculate and we have get planet mass. And this is calculate, get planet mass, and it takes in the name of the planet, and it returns, you know what, instead of doing like this, let's actually use a match case thing. There you go, so let's do like this. There we go. So we have this match if, so we're going to match, it's just a switch case essentially for Python. So we have the planet, we're going to switch it to lowercase to be sure that we're not having troubles with the cases. So if it's Earth, we're going to return this, Jupiter, until all of the planets, sorry for Pluto. And there we go. So now we have initialized our tools. Now let's actually start using them. So it is now the time to initialize our agent and actually run this. So let's do that right now. Okay, so now it's actually time to start running our agent. But however, something that I forgot to do before, it's a little mistake right here. When we call our agent, message has to be optional, because remember that here we're testing if message. So I'm going to give message a default value of an empty string. And if this is an empty string, then this is going to be evaluated to false, so this is not going to run, okay? So I'm just going to save this, rerun this cell right here, And let's actually then initialize our agent. So let's just initialize our agent. So let's call it something that makes sense as someone who is an expert in planets. So I'm going to call it Neil Tyson. And this guy is going to be an agent. And remember that when you initialize an agent, you want to initialize it with these parameters that you set right here. So the first one is the client, which is the instance that is going to allow us to communicate with our language model. And in this case, our client is the one from Groq. So the client, we already initialized it. This is the one that we're going to be passing. And then we have to pass in the system message, which is the one that is going to be incorporated into the first message right here. So this system message is going to be the system prompt that we defined a little bit a few minutes ago. So let's just set the client to client and the system to the system prompt and just run this. Okay, so there we go. That is the initial part of our client, of our agent. Now we can actually start running it. So let's say Neil Tyson, what is the mass of the Earth times, let's say, times 5. And let's just check the result. You're going to print the result right here. So what is the mass of the Earth times 5? We're going to execute this. And in order so that you see what's actually going to happen, we're actually calling our agent, and that is actually executing this call function right here. And since we are passing in a message, it is going to append that message to the messages list that we have right here. And then it's going to execute that list of messages and then append the resulting message to its list of messages too. So let's take a look at how that looks right here. So we're going to execute this. And here we get the thought. I need to find the mass of the Earth. And just to show you what actually happened in the list of messages, let's take a look at Neil Tyson. And let's tap into the messages. So here you see that we initialized it using the system prompt, and we have the system prompt that we initialized up here. Then the second message is the user message, which is our message right here. So here it says that the user message and the content is what is the mass of the Earth, which is the one that we passed in right here, and which was added in during this line of code right here. And then we executed it, and then we got whatever response it got to the list of messages too. And that is this one right here. I need to find the mass of the Earth. Now, what we want to do is we want to re-execute the agent with this messages right here to get the next step in the loop, which is going to be the action. We already got the thought, now we're expecting the action. So what we do is we rerun the agent, but this time we don't pass in any message because we already passed in our question. Now we just want to rerun the messages that it has already in it. So let's do that, enter, and that we see that the next one is the action. So the action that it chose is get planet mass, and it passed in the parameter of Earth. So what we're going to do with that is we're going to manually ourselves on our side, we're going to write the next prompt. We're going to write the next prompt with the observation, and we're going to run this. So the result, let's call it the observation. The observation is going to equal to get planet mass, and here we're going to pass in the Earth, and let's see the observation. So we have that the planet mass is 5.9 times 10 to the 24th. And that essentially is the function that we created right here, okay? And this is, of course, a mock function. And the idea is that you can have any function right here. You can have a function that targets the API from Google to find search results. You can write a function that updates your local calendar, a function that sends an email, etc. Okay, so that is the magic behind all of this. And then we got the observation. Now what we're going to do is we're going to run again our agent, And this time we're going to pass in the observation to it. So let's say that the next prompt is going to be an F string like this. And we're going to say observation equals, and then we're going to pass in the observation right here. And this is the next prompt. And this is the next prompt that we're going to be passing into our agent right now. Okay, so let's do that. Let's do that right here. And then just repeat what we did right here. Result equals Neil Tyson, but this time we're going to pass in the next prompt, which is the observation. Okay, then we print the result. Okay, so its next thought is I need to multiply this by 5. Now let's take a look again at the messages to see what's going on. So we had the system message that we talked about already. Then we had the the initial message that I sent to this agent. Then the first thing that it thought is I need to find the mass of the Earth. It executed the action. Then we manually executed the action ourselves and sent it back to it. So with this observation right here, and now it decided that it needs to perform a multiplication for this. So remember, this time we do this again. And we do not need an observation this time because we're just going to re-execute this thing right here. And then it shows an action. We're going to calculate this, and let's actually run that. So in order to calculate it, just going to call that observation again. And the observation is this one. And then just like before, we're going to pass in our observation right here. We're going to pass in the observation as an observation and then see the result. Okay, so then we have the final answer. And let's take a look at the messages again, just to be sure that we understand everything that happened inside of the agent. We had our system message, then we had our initial question, what is the mass of the Earth? Our assistant who thought, action, and then we ourselves sent it an observation, then same thing, thought, action, observation, until it found the answer. Okay, now you can see how we can use this inside a loop. Okay, so all that we're going to have to do now is to create a loop that is going to execute all of this automatically, and it is going to allow our agents to think by themselves without us having to manually recall the agent every single time that we wanted to think. Okay, so let's write this loop that is going to allow our agent to think gradually until it finds the final solution to its answer. So let's do that. Perfect. Okay, so let's actually create this loop that is going to run the agent until it finds the final answer to the question that we asked it. And in order to do this, we're going to I actually encourage you to try to write this loop yourselves. I think it's a pretty educational exercise and it's not super hard. So what you have to do is essentially call the agent in a loop of a maximum iteration. So let's say that we're going to set the maximum iterations to 10. And then we're going to run the agent and we're going to analyze the string that it returns every single time. And if it has pause inside of it, we're going to read the action that it selected, execute the action, and then return, call again the agent with the observation. And that until it has an answer, until it returns something that looks like answer, whatever, or until we reach the maximum number of iterations, okay? So let's actually code that. Please, you can pause the video right now, try to do it yourselves, or you can watch the solution right now. So the first thing that we need to do is we're going to import regular expressions, regex, because we're going to need to analyze a string and to analyze the contents of the string, and there's no better way to do that than using regex. So let's define, first of all, our loop. And we're going to initialize it saying the maximum iterations, and then our query. Okay. However, actually, let's just change this name. It's not going to be loop. It's going to, let's call it agent loop. There we go. And right here, we're going to initialize our agent. Again, we're going to call it agent. And just like we did before, we're going to call it client system. And we're going to pass in the system prompt that we initialized up here. Actually, let's pass in the system prompt right here too. And then we're going to have to define the tools that we're going to have available right here. And the tools in this case are going to be the ones that we selected. So it's going to be calculate. And the other one is going to be get planet mass. There we go. And then let's just define our next prompt, which is going to be the first prompt in this case, which is going to be the query. And then let's just initialize our counter to 0, okay? In order so that we only run the number of iterations that we actually want to run. So let's initialize this. So while the maximum, while we are inside of the maximum iterations, we're just going to count the iteration, and let's actually call our agent. So we're going to call the agent with the next prompt, and let's just print the result. There we go. So we're calling the agent and printing the result. This is essentially the same thing as we're doing right here, right? There we go. And once we get that result, we're going to analyze that result that we got from the agent. So if we have pause in the result, that means that it got into an action selection, something like this. So if we have pause right here, we're going to have to find what action it chose. And in order to find the action, so if pause in result, and yeah, let's just set for the action too. And there is an action inside the result. We're going to set the action equal to action result dot group 1. Okay, so I mean, this is what Copilot is suggesting here, and actually Copilot suggested me another one in my test, so I'm just going to use this other one. And I mean, of course, I mean, I'm not great with regex, so all I did was just asked ChatGPT for the regular expression that is going to identify the action name and the parameter from a string that looks like this. So that's all I did, and that's how I got this piece of code right here, okay? So I mean, if you're good at regex, you can probably do it yourself. So there you go. This essentially is going to return to us the action name and the parameters, okay? Actually, let me just show you how that looks. So the action is going to be this one right here, and let's call the result something like this. So if the result is the action calculate then you have that. Oops, what's going on here? Apparently we have a problem here. So name RE is not defined. Okay, so I have to import RE. And let's just take a look at action. And you can see that the action is calculate, and then here we have the parameter. So it's pretty useful regex to actually just get the name of the action and the parameter that we want just by using this regex expression, okay? So there we go. Now we have the action right here, and we can just select the chosen tool to be the first element of this action array, and then the tool input to be the second one right here. I'm just going to call it argument. There we go. So, I mean, just to be clear, argument is going to be tapping into this part right here, and the chosen tool is going to be tapping into this one right here. Okay, so now what we want to do is check if the chosen tool is within our tool set that we have for the agent. And in order to do that, we're going to say if the chosen tool is in tools, then all that we're going to do is we're going to execute this. So the result from the tool is going to be equal to, well, autocomplete is not helping me here, so we're just going to evaluate the result from the chosen tool. I'm going to have to type it. Great. Okay, so the first is the chosen tool, and then we're going to pass in the argument like this. There we go. I mean, in case you don't know what's actually going on right here, eval essentially just runs whatever code you pass in right here. And what the code that we're passing right here is just the chosen tool, which is, remember, calculate in this, in this example, or it can be get planet mass. And then between parentheses, we're passing in the argument that we got from here too, okay? So essentially, this one right here is going to have the result of us executing our tool with the argument that was selected, okay? Now, once we have that, what we're going to do is we're going to define the next prompt to be equal to an f string saying observation, and then we're going to pass in just the result from the tool. And this is essentially the same thing as we did right here, okay? And now with this observation right here, we're going to be able to, right, so now we have the next prompt, and we're going to tap in, we're going to say else, which is if the chosen tool is not in tools, we're just going to return an observation saying something like, sorry, but the tool was not found in the array or something. Let's say I have this right here. Observation, tool not found. So there we go. And okay, so let me just go over the whole loop again so far. So we are initializing our agent. We are initializing the name of the tools that we have. And we're setting the first prompt to be the query that we're going to send to the agent loop. And then we're initializing a loop that is going to call our agent and check the result. If the result includes pause, then what we're going to do is if it includes pause, it should also include action. And if it includes this too, then we're going to run get the action name and the parameters. Then we're going to run this right here if the tool selected is actually within the tools that we have right here. So we're going to run this tool and then set the next prompt in the iteration to this observation. And if there was an error during the completion and for some reason the language model returned an action that was not within the specified actions, we're just going to say that the tool was not found in order to try to make it think that it didn't select the right tool, so it will probably select the right tool. So this is so far what's going on. Now what we're going to do right now is we're going to print the next prompt just to be sure that we're understanding what's happening here, and we're going to continue. And this continue is essentially just going to exit the first iteration. This iteration right here. So if there is a pause and an action in the result, we're going to just run this and then restart the loop, which essentially is going to rerun our agent with the next prompt, okay? Now, if there is answer in the result, which means that we got an answer like this, then that means that the agent already found the final answer. So if that is the case, what we're going to do, if answer in result, we're just going to break out of the loop. So this is essentially just going to tell us that we have completed the task, and we should not go over more iterations in this loop. And this is all. Actually, this is the full loop. Let me just zoom out a little bit so that you can see all of it. And yeah, I mean, this is essentially all that we have right here. So we imported regex, we initialized our agent, we selected the tools that we have available, we called, we said that the first thing that we're going to call our agent with, the first message is going to be the query from our agent loop. And then we run all of these iterations until we reach the maximum number of iterations. And then every single time we're executing the agent, and if in the result we have pause, we're going to run the tool, and if we have answer, we're just going to break out of the entire loop. And that's essentially all. So let's see if I did not make any mistakes while writing this. So let's just run this. So we're going to say agent loop. We're going to set the maximum iterations to, let's say, 10. The system message is the system prompt that we defined before, and the query is going to be, let's say, what is the mass of the Earth plus the mass of Mercury, and all of it times 5. Why not? So let's see how it goes. Remember that we're using Llama, which one are we using? Llama 370B. I recommend that you use this one if you're using this for agentic behavior, although it might work with slower models, but with smaller models. But for agentic behavior, I recommend at least Llama 70B. So let's see how this looks. Let's execute this. We have an error apparently. Earth is not defined. What is the problem here? Oh, apparently we forgot to put this in between quotes in order to tell it that it's a string. So let's see. There we go. Oh, good. Well, okay, so that's an agent. Great. So we have the thought. I need to find the mass of the Earth and Mercury separately. So the first action is get the mass of the planet Earth. We get the observation. The second thought is I have the mass of the Earth. Now I need the mass of Mercury. Got the mass of Mercury. Got an observation. The next thought is now I have the mass of both. Now I need to add them together. Calculated them. We got the observation. Next thought is now I have to sum both of them and now I have the sum, I have to multiply them by 5. Executed this, got an observation, and then we have the final answer, which is the mass of the Earth plus the mass of Mercury, and all of it times 5 is this. So, well, we have successfully created our agent. Congratulations for getting all the way here. It was a really fun trip, and I hope you enjoyed it. Now you understand how agents work and how the ReAct framework, the ReAct design works. And yeah, in a more robust implementation of this, you would not be parsing the string like this. You would be calling the language model that supports tool calling, because as you might have noticed, we did not use any tool calling functionality. We're parsing this directly from the text. And you may see that this is probably not as robust as it could be. However, some language models and Groq models actually do support tool calling, which allows us to get the output from the language model in a JSON format. And this is, of course, way more useful because we can get the action, the tool and the parameters already inside a JSON object without having us to parse it with regex, which is good, but it's probably not as robust as it could be. But yeah, I mean, this is just a very rudimentary example just to show you how this works. And yeah, I mean, you have successfully created a working React agent. So congratulations for that. And okay, something that I told you that I was going to mention is that I'm going to be starting an AI engineering bootcamp, which is not actually just a bootcamp that you buy and you complete yourself. It's kind of a more of a cohort where you're going to be signing up and you're going to have a direct interaction with me. So every week we're going to have live sessions. I'm going to be sending you course material, theory, and exercises so that you can complete them every week. And every week you can ask me questions personally, and I will be there to answer your questions to make sure that you get to the end of the program. And the idea is that by the end of the program, you're going to be able to create any kind of LLM application using Python and also with a front end, okay? So it's kind of a full stack course. Now, this is the first instance of the course. And of course, for the first instance, it's going to be guided, so I'm going to be there answering your questions for you, and the spots are limited, of course, because I want to have a more personalized interaction with you guys. So be sure to check that out. I mean, it's not open yet. By going to the landing page that I'll link in the description, you can sign up for the waitlist, and you will get a link within 3 weeks when I'm going to be opening the signups. So yeah, and right here in the landing page as well, you have this nice little button that you can click, and actually you can talk directly to me. So this one goes right to my phone. So if you have any questions about the course, you can ask me a question here. And if not, if you have a question about the course, of the video's content, you can of course leave it in the description of the video, in the comments of this video, and I will answer that too. So great, thank you for your attention, and I will hope to see you either in the comment section or in the course. So see you soon.